Looks like there'll be sponges. Oh, let me see them. Sorry.
All right.
Where are we here? Why can't I get the recording?
You can't see it?
Meeting is being recorded. Got it. Okay. I have to say got it. Yeah.
Take one. Okay.
A clapper.
I actually bought that at Amazon, if you can believe it.
We need Jack Webb here to talk about your clapper.
I didn't even know it was called a clapper. I looked up movie boards or whatever.
Okay.
So we're back with What They Said. It is May 10th, and Stephen, Phil, and Scott stay home and watch movies. And in most of the episodes, well, all the episodes we've done, we've mostly just been talking about usually current or semi-current movies, but we're trying a little bit of a different theme this time. So I asked Stephen and Phil if they were interested in coming up with a list of the way I sort of characterize it. I don't know if I put it this way in the original email, but I think of it maybe less as about movies per se and more about movie experiences. So what were some of the more memorable, experiences going to movies? And it could be in any, like in my own list. And so we've each come up with top 10 lists, basically. I think Stephen's might be 9. But in my own list, it really doesn't have a lot to do with my favorite movies. There are a couple on there where that does come into play. But I'm just sort of fascinated by the idea. I think a lot of people do this in music writing. They tend to get very personal about, where they first heard music and how it means, something to them in that respect. But I didn't think it's done quite as much in movies. However, I will show this, and I swear this actually is just something I thought about today. I thought, I have a book that's kind of a little bit along those lines. Have you guys seen that book, or do you have a copy of it?
I have it.
Have you seen that one, Stephen? It's called Private Screenings.
No.
It's quite good, actually. As you can see, I got it for $3.99 used. It's basically, it's famous people, mostly connected, well, maybe entirely connected with the movie world. And they basically write about a favorite movie they saw. And it is fairly personal. I flipped through it, and a number of the entries, they talk as much about just the, where they saw the movie or who they saw the movie with or what was memorable about the whole experience. So I think that's in a, nutshell kind of what we're going to try and do here. We've each come up with lists, and I think, we probably have some slightly different rationale. Anyone want to jump in and say, like, how they came up with their own list or what sort of thought process they went through? I
just wanted to say 2 critics who write that way, movie critics. One, obviously, Pauline Kael, who talks, recounts arguments she had after the movie and comments from people sitting near her. And the other one, I think that David Thompson book you bought me is a lot like that.
I had that in mind while I was doing this too. Yeah. What's that? How to Watch a Movie, I think.
How to Watch a Movie. And then I also think of Stanley Kaufman beginning his Godfather 2 review saying, I like sequels. And then he talks about going to see Tom Mix films when he was younger, because his life sort of spanned the entire history of film. Anyway.
Okay. Stephen, what was your sort of methodology or your rationale for your list?
I started by just thinking, usually of things that I thought about before, where I remembered the experience itself. Like you say, not so much what movie as something happened in the course of watching it that stood out. And so everything on my list has something of that in it. The one is specific to a theater, and one I added since I sent my last email I added one more that has a specific theater. And finally, one I have is a drive-in. But in each case, it's about the experience of watching it. It's not that I have something interesting to say about the movie.
I'm half and half, Scott. I think mine is certainly half of them. The experience of watching the film had a lot to do with the film itself. So I have about half of mine are great films. But then these weren't on my list of 10. I just added a bunch where just something happened at the screening.
Right.
Funny, usually funny stuff. And they have less to do with the film that was playing. At least 2 of them have to do with, I guess, speaker before or after the film.
Okay. I guess on my own, it's kind of similar to both of you. I realized as I was doing it, I felt like what I was kind of doing, and more by accident than by design, just sort of almost coming up with a personal film biography in some ways. I did do it chronological from my experience with the movie, not by the movie itself.
Right.
So I think maybe it made it a little easier for me to come up with the list. Like I went back to childhood with my first one, and then just the different sort of points along the line. And yeah, some of them, I'd say most of them are probably more about something that happened or just some impression that, it's almost like what little event might have happened. And it's very small stuff sometimes. Like there's a couple where something really weird happened, but a lot of them are just, I walked out of the theater feeling different than when I walked in, and regardless of the quality of the movie or something like that. So that was my ration.
You know what I wish were on my list? And I don't know if it's an urban legend or not. You may have heard it, Scott, when they had a screening of supposedly Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the Kingsway Theater.
I remember hearing that.
Yeah, some guy jumped up and ran up and down the aisles with a chainsaw.
Yeah.
I really wonder if that ever happened. I don't know.
Well, and the one example, I know you'll both obviously resonate with this, that did come to mind, and you mentioned Pauline Kael and her great intro to Last Tango in Paris, right? Like just the way she sets the scene, is people like so galvanized by this, and it's like the rite of spring premiere or whatever. So stuff like that.
I read other people that were there for that screening. Said, like, what is she talking about? Everybody filed out quietly.
So who would like to dive in first with one or a couple of choices? Anyone?
I don't mind starting.
Okay.
I'll start with, I think I would have been 12 or 13. I never thought to add this when I sent you my first list, but I thought, earlier stuff I remember. First film, my parents always told me it was Disney's Sword in the Stone. I don't remember anything about it. I remember getting frightened at this screening of a Disney film with Fred McMurray where it was called Bluebeard's Ghost, and had a painting at the end of the hallway and the painting's eyes moved. And then when I visited my aunt in Detroit, she had the Mona Lisa at the end of the hallway, and I freaked out and ran and jumped into my mom's arms. I remember stuff like that. But the first real screening I remember would be, I realized how much I loved was just like, I couldn't believe. And it was the theater too. It was seeing the Poseidon Adventure with my mom and dad at the Imperial 6 in it would have been 74. And that's what I wanted to show on the screen. Like I can remember it was the Imperial 6 and I wanted to check my accuracy on that. So can I share, Scott? And it was the Imperial 6. Here's an ad. The Imperial 6 opened up in late 73, I think. So here's an ad from the Toronto Star, June 1st, 1974. And it's very small. You can't see it, Imperial 6. And you probably don't know that theater, do you, Scott?
No, I don't think. No, I don't think so. Where was it?
It's very close to where you worked in HMV. It's where the Ed Mervis Theater is now.
Okay, yeah, I definitely don't remember that before my time in Toronto. Yeah.
And so there's what it looked like. It was just this great looking theater. And of course, if you've seen the Poseidon Adventure, the specific thing I remember, you can probably guess it's the one thing that Kael made fun of, where the huge wave comes. And Leslie Nielsen, in his Leslie Nielsen dramatic actor days before Naked Gun and all that, like looks really stone-faced, and he says something about the wave, and Kael quoted it like, that is one monstrous wave.
That's great.
But being 13 years old or 12 years old, and my family, my mom and dad, we didn't go to see films downtown. We were already living in Georgetown. Just the whole experience was amazing. And man, when that wave came up and the theater was just going crazy, that's the first, I think, in-person screening that really had an effect on me, because of the theater and the film.
I remember what a phenomenon that film was, and I definitely did go see it for sure. I was big into the disaster movies. I think, all my friends were into that or whatever, my sisters and myself. So
I actually was. I saw Airport, but I still have never seen The Towering Inferno.
I saw that one too. Yeah.
Okay. I've never seen Earthquake, but I love the Poseidon Adventure.
Yeah.
You remind me, these aren't on my list, but we saw the Towering Inferno when it came out, and Earthquake was playing in the next theater in the multiplex. I don't know if you remember, Earthquake was in
Sense around.
Yeah,
Sense Around or something.
that's right.
Every time there was an earthquake, they basically had an enormous subwoofer. So we're watching this fire movie, and every once in a while from the next door comes.
That's
So
great.
that's what when I think of Towering Inferno, I think of rumbling from Earthquake.
That's great.
Those films just dominated for a couple of years.
Oh yeah.
Okay, what about you guys for your screenings when you were younger?
I'll jump in if you want, Stephen. So mine is not a screening per se. My list kind of has an interesting sort of loop because it sort of begins in one place and ends up in a kind of similar place using different technology. But growing up, my mom was really big on making home movies. So we had a Super 8 projector. She used to make tons of movies all the time. And I even made a few of my own at a pretty young age. But sometime, I think the way it worked is you would buy these reels and you would make your movie, but then you'd have to take them into a Black's camera or something to get them processed, right? So on one trip to Black's camera, and we had a projector, and I saw a box or a display of like silent movies and stuff, and they're just like these 3-minute, like this size sort of thing, and a 3-minute, 2-minute reel, whatever. I can't remember the length. And for some reason, I think the first one I bought was like a Tarzan movie or something, and I must have been pretty young. I'm thinking 8 or 9 or something like that, probably. And my mom taught me how to use the reel-to-reel projector. And then I just went on this huge kick. Like for 2 years when I was a kid, anytime, I'd ask for them for my birthday and for Christmas and stuff. I always wanted Super 8 films. And I amassed, for a kid, I amassed a pretty sizable collection of, I moved from Tarzan right away into stuff like Charlie. They used to sell little Charlie Chaplin silent films. They might have just been excerpts from other movies, obviously. And Laurel and Hardy. I don't think they had the Marx Brothers, but so the one I actually put on my list, I did have to look it up.
I saw that
It's
1 a.m.
the Charlie Chaplin 1 a.m. I never knew what the title was, and I have a feeling that's not what it was called on the little reel I had. But the scene was very memorable, and I know it was the one that I watched over and over again. I was just so fascinated by it. It is a great scene. It's the scene where Charlie Chaplin comes home drunk, and it is a silent movie. I think 1912 or something like that. Maybe I'll have to check that date.
I'll check that.
And he's trying. I forget what they call it, a Murphy bed or something. It's those kind of beds that were in the wall, and you would pull them down. I guess so, during the day you could use the space for something else or whatever. And it's just him drunk, and he's trying to get the bed down, and hits him on the chin, and he's trying to climb on it to weigh it down, and it gets flopped off. It is a pretty great scene, actually, and I was just completely fascinated with it as a kid. And I think part of the reason I decided to list it is because I was, before I think, or maybe it's around the same time, but I think even before pop music really sort of took over, I really became obsessed with silent movies. I would buy books on it. I've had about 4 or 5 books on Charlie Chaplin. I could actually reel off his filmography. I think like when I was 10 or 11 years old. I was big on the Marx Brothers. I was big on Laurel and Hardy. People would buy me books for my birthday and Christmas. And then the weirdest thing about it, I think when pop music sort of did take over, it just went completely to the wayside. I definitely regret that I got rid of almost all that stuff at some point, like when I, moved to college or something. I just I literally had a box of movie books, not critic books, but, picture books and stuff like that. And some pretty really interesting ones. I'd go to W.H. Smith and Kohl's and buy them. And, all that stuff has disappeared. But I mean, it did. So I sort of characterize it as the first time not only that I watched some movies, but that I kind of consciously thought about movies.
Yeah.
But it's pre going to the movie theater for sure.
The film is 1916, and of course the entire 1 a.m. bed scene is on YouTube.
Yeah.
For just under 5 minutes.
It's pretty great.
And then take a look at it. I've never seen the film.
So
go ahead, Stephen, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, I kind of thought this would happen, which is everything you guys say clicks something in my brain.
I know, same with me.
I'll try to stick to my thing here. Semi-chronological. So before I get to our local movie theater, I think I'll talk about watching Ingmar Bergman on TV when I was young. It would have been I would have been 15, so it moved up a little bit here. And when I was younger, I watched Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, Atomic Submarine, and etc. I watched a lot of those kind of movies. Anyway, there was a UHF. Do I need to explain UHF? I just realized.
Is that
That's
13
the other,
and
the
lower
other
or
T, yeah.
14?
You had a dial on your TV, and you had maybe 3 channels, 4, and then all of a sudden they opened up this other part of the thing that went from like 14 to 82
Yeah.
or something.
That's
Yeah,
about
you
it.
did need to remind me of that actually, because I forgot how it worked. Yeah.
So we had a couple of new channels. One of them, which was channel 20, I remember that. And they started on I think it was Monday nights. They started showing something they called Adults Only Movie. I looked this up, so I wanted to make sure I had my memory. All it meant was that it wasn't really a movie for kids, but they didn't have nudity. That's probably all they really worried about. But they basically ended up showing art movies. The first 2, as when I looked at it, it said Virgin Spring and Repulsion were the first 2 movies they showed. I very much remember Through a Glass Darkly is one of the ones I remember. They were dubbed, you're watching it on TV, there was commercials. Couldn't have been a worse way to watch. But I guarantee you it was the first time I was even aware that this kind of movie existed. And so because of that, especially in the case of Through Glass Darkly, I was very moved watching it. It didn't matter that it was on TV and it was edited and it was dubbed or whatever. It just got me. And I wanted to know where you saw other movies like this. It took me many years to find them because no other TV channel around at the time was showing adult-only movies.
Wow. And were those on late at night or anytime?
I wasn't old enough for them to be that late. Maybe
Okay.
9 o'clock or something, maybe.
Yeah.
No, the latest ones were when they showed monster movies. That's what they showed late. And there were complaints, people saying, how can you show that, this and that? But I think they were careful in what they picked. I don't remember ever seeing a naked person.
I think that some of the, wasn't there
it.
a Bergman film, I've never seen it, but called Monica or Monique that had
Some of
nudity
Monica,
in it?
yes.
Monica. I mean, I
That-
think that, or close, borderline, I don't know.
No, it had nudity. That one
Yeah,
didn't show up
I
on
thought
that. But yes.
And did the Bergman, I just have to ask, did the Bergman movies, they stuck with you? Do you still like those movies or?
No, I thought I'll get to my film major days.
Okay.
I've watched a lot of them, and I tend to think of him as being, yeah, everybody knows. But whenever I actually look at, Letterboxd or whatever and see what I think of Ingmar Bergman, the fact is I love a lot of his movies very much. And
You've seen SCTV's Whispers of the Wolf, right?
oh yes, I make use of that one on my blog any chance I get. Absolutely. But yeah, I like Bergman very much, and I don't know that I could tie it back into watching him on TV in the 60s in dubbed versions. Once in a while, I still discover one I haven't seen. I think I watched Shame for the first time not that long ago, and thought it was great. And most of the time, that's what I think. Oh, this is a great movie.
I saw Shame very late, like probably 3 or 4 years ago, and that's the one that Kale really loves.
Mm-hmm.
She really goes all out for it, and I think it's going steady. She was not. I prefer Persona. I don't think she was that big on Persona. She gave it that kind of guarded review where she said, "Yeah, I can see why people think this is great," but yeah, I like
Persona for me this is something about how we watch movies, I think, in that there's a chronology of when they're made, and then there's the one when we watch them. And so sometimes we see a movie that was made before another movie that we've seen already. In the case of Persona, I frequently saw one of my all-time favorites, Performance, compared to Persona in a negative way, like, oh, this movie's no good, Persona's better. So I think for that reason, I think I waited on Persona for a long time, thinking, well, I like Performance. I don't need to watch that movie. Of course, that's nonsense. When I finally saw it, it was a great movie. But to me, because I saw the one before the other, it got confusing.
Fanny and Alexander was close to my first Bergman film, even though that was sort of his last film. I think I'd seen Persona before that. Fanny and Alexander was 82, but I think maybe Persona and The Seventh Seal were the only ones I'd seen before that.
I think I saw Persona with you, Phil, the one time I saw it
Did
in
we?
the theater. I think so, yeah. I think you
Probably the Cinematheque, yeah.
something like that, yeah.
Okay, so
Go
you
ahead,
want
Phil.
to move into, well, just I can now move into more things that I saw after I, got in the movie bug. So the first one I'll go to is, and this is the one that sticks out first in my mind, seeing The Deer Hunter. I think it opened up Christmas of 70. Annie Hall won Best Picture in 77. So I think it won the award show was in 78, but it was waiting for 77. I have it in my mind that The Deer Hunter opened up in the holiday season in 78. And it came along without a lot of fanfare. People were looking forward to Apocalypse Now, and I don't remember a lot of pre-publicity for The Deer Hunter, but it became a sensation, of course. I had just turned 17, and I don't know if I probably with friends. We drove down to Toronto, and it was the Varsity Theater at the Manulife Center, which is still there, but it's changed a lot. It was one of sort of the prestige theaters in Toronto. And, wow, I just thought it was amazing. I watch it now, and there's so much about the film that just doesn't wear well, but it's a real kind of male thing, that film. Some of the worst parts have to do with that. And I was just so wrapped up in it every way, the cinematography, the scene where they're singing in the bar. I didn't think about the politics at all. I mean, it's probably a borderline right-wing film. I don't know quite, but if it has any kind of politics, it's in that direction. Sort of saying, excusing the country for Vietnam, basically. And I didn't think about the historical accuracy. I probably assumed it was all true, that all these Russian roulette games were going on. Didn't know beyond De Niro. I don't know how much I knew about the cast. I'm sure I recognized Christopher Walken was brand new. Meryl Streep was brand new. I probably knew Cazale already from, The Godfathers. But again, and I told you, everyone's going to end up with, and it was overwhelming. And I sat there, and I'd never seen a film like that. And it felt at the time like, okay, I'm a serious film fan now. I'm seeing this 3-hour film on Vietnam. And it's clearly, I mean, even if you don't like The Deer Hunter, I think Kale kind of hated parts of it, but she said the word she used was astonishing. So I would think even if you don't find so much in the film objectionable, you can see where it's an ambitious film and there's art in it. And that was just such an experience. And I think I could trace or blame that film for deciding to take film in university. Michael Cimino, you owe me.
If
What's
you watched
that?
it now, is that initial experience still with you?
Good question. If I watch it now, certainly the film, like you can just pick out one flaw after another. But there's still scenes that work really well. And the deer hunting scene is just kind of beautiful. The Vietnam stuff, I don't know, maybe not as much. The performances are great. Maybe like Cazale's great, Walken's great, Meryl Streep. I don't know that she's ever been better. I don't know if I'm like, when I watch it now, I'm back in that theater because I can't be 17 again, but I certainly remember that screening really, really well.
That's great.
And okay. I guess, yeah, we were going to group them together, but okay. So I'll make this really quick. I should group it together with my first screening of Apocalypse Now, which was such a big deal because it was, I don't know if either of you guys remember this, it was like an event screening. You had, at least in Toronto, you had to order tickets in advance, which was unheard of. The tickets were $10, which was unheard of. There was only 3 or 4 screenings. The film had been talked about for at least months and probably years. I remember the Star did a dispatch from the Cannes Film Festival that year, and whoever wrote it, literally, I think, called it the greatest film ever made. So I was completely ready for it. Seen The Godfathers, I'd seen The Conversation, I think, and I just went to it with such an uncritical eye and just took it all in whole. And I went back to my friends. I was working at the movie theater at the time, and I went back and I told them, yes, it's absolutely the greatest film ever made. Like I'd seen so many, it's so much to judge it against. And what I remember, and I would literally try to recreate this with my students for years after, was the experience of sitting in that theater, the University Theater, which you probably never went to, right, Scott? I'm going to guess, just because you were in London.
Yeah,
it was still around. So. I think it was closed by the time you would have gone to Ryerson. Anyway, it was the prestige theater in Toronto. And nobody knows what's going to be in this film. And all I remember is the helicopter sound starting on the left side of the theater and moving across the theater, which I'd never experienced before. And then the opening scene, the opening shot comes up, which is the forest, and hearing helicopters moving, and then the doors start up, and then you get that just amazing napalm explosion. And I remember that so well. And I would play it every year for my students and I'd say, okay, now pretend it's 1979. And they can't even remember 2008, So that was, I'll group that one with The Deer Hunter. Two of my most memorable early films as a teenager were both about the war.
That's great. Go ahead. Okay, well, I'll actually try and bundle two of my choices. We're getting low on the time for this particular recording, but my number 2 choice and my number 4, it's actually 5 movies in total, but they're all movies I saw on TV. I listed them separately for different reasons, but they're, so I moved from the Super 8 experience into the TV experience, at least most memorably. I'm sure I went to the movie theater when I was young a few times too. But the first one, so my number 2, I listed The Wizard of Oz, Bonnie and Clyde, and Brian's Song. Brian's Song's a little bit of an outlier, but these were sort of event movies for me and my siblings. Not so much my brother; he's the one because he's older than the rest of us. But at me and my sisters, I'm certain we watched these every year. It seems weird to me now that Bonnie and Clyde. I'm thinking it was an ABC movie of the week, but I know for sure I watched it on TV at least 3 or 4 times before I knew anything about, its importance as a movie. Yeah. I mean, the one comment I wrote, one of the things I loved about Bonnie and Clyde as a kid, and obviously they must have cut a fair bit out because it would have been less than 10 years after it came out, I think, or maybe around 10 years.
I think you could cut just maybe a minute out of that. Probably.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, there's like the bullet in the eye and all that sort of stuff. But it was the music. I actually did sort of think of it as a kid as a comedy because it was this comical, almost Keystone Cops type of music, right? Like it's the banjo, but it was very slapstick like. So, but I do remember at a certain point, like I remember maybe my 3rd or 4th viewing, I did kind of realize, oh yeah, like this is really fun at start, but I think it gets really like serious after this and it becomes a serious story. But I knew that movie really, really well before I had ever had a chance to actually view it, post reading movie criticism and post going to repertory cinemas and stuff. And by the time, I think the first actual viewing I had, when I was more of an adult was probably 10 years after those TV experiences. And I felt I still knew the movie really well from, beginning to end, pretty much. It all came back to me. So there was that. The Wizard of Oz obviously is on a different end of the spectrum. I have a feeling that's a very common.
Oh yeah.
Voice. I mean, that was an annual, but again, a movie like that might actually be the movie that I've actually seen the most in my life because we just watched it every single year. I've watched it at least a couple of times with my kids. It's not a movie I revere or anything. I think it's obviously like incredibly well done. I'd love to see a kids movie like that now in some ways. I don't have much else to say about that. I mean, it's always the flying monkeys. That was the scene that I looked forward to. That was the sort of the scariest scene. Brian's Song, I don't have to say much about that. But again, it's that whole sibling experience. Like, oh, it's Brian's Song is on and we got to watch it.